Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to History for Sleep, a calm place where you find sleep history videos for a good sleep. Tonight, we are moving to a new history story of ancient Rome. As twilight fell over ancient Rome, the city began to hum with strange life. The day's chaos gave way to flickering lamplight, the scent of roasted dormice, and the echo of footsteps in marble courtyards. Romans gathered to dine on delicacies that would make even the bravest modern stomach turn: fermented fish sauce, stuffed flamingos, and wine sweetened with lead. Yet, as the feasting ended, an unease settled in. Beyond their walls, in the blackness of the Roman night, there were whispers of thieves, spirits, and things best left unseen. Tonight, we descend into their world to uncover the shocking truths about what Romans ate, drank, and feared when darkness claimed the empire. But before we start, I hope you enjoyed my previous videos, so don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Now dim the light, maybe turn on the fan for a soft background, and we start diving into ancient Rome. As the sun dips behind the 7 hills of Rome, the empire exhales. The roar of the markets, the clang of metal workers, and the shouts of merchants fade into a quieter rhythm. A warm orange glow spills over the rooftops, and the marble statues take on a soft, golden hue. For the Romans, this was a sacred transition from the labors of daylight to the mysteries of the night. The streets that once carried senators, soldiers, and slaves now hum with different energy. Lamps are lit, oil flickers in glass bowls, and the smell of smoke mingles with that of freshly baked bread. The city slows, but it does not sleep. Somewhere, in a grand villa, the household slaves prepare a dinner of olives, cheese, and figs, while in a cramped apartment block, a mother hushes her child to rest beside a dim flame. The night is beginning, not just a time between days, but a realm of its own. To walk into the Roman night is to step into a living story where pleasure, superstition, and danger blend beneath the ancient stars. The first sign of evening is scent. Rome after sunset smells alive, a mixture of perfumed oils, cooking fires, and the sharp tang of the Tiber River. Street vendors pack up their wares, but the taverns open their doors wide. From within, the fragrance of wine, sweetened with honey or spiced with herbs, drifts out into the cooling air. Patrons gather, laughing over wooden cups, their voices rising above the distant clatter of horse hooves. Somewhere nearby, a baker works through the night, kneading dough by the faint glow of a lamp. You can almost hear the soft rhythm of his hands on the table, steady and slow, as though time itself has loosened its grip. The Romans knew that the night was not just for rest. It was for living, feasting, and whispering. Beneath the quiet, the city hums with secrets. The rich retreat to lavish dining halls, where silver plates gleam, and the poor gather in dark corners, sharing meager meals. In this mingling of smoke and laughter, Rome after dark feels timeless, alive in a way that only ancient cities could be, teetering on the edge between decadence and decay. As true night descends, the city becomes a constellation of flickering lights. Oil lamps, set in niches or hung from doorways, burn with a soft golden shimmer. The wealthy might have bronze or glass lamps carved with scenes of gods and lovers, while the poor make do with clay vessels filled with olive oil and a twisted linen wick. The light is gentle, trembling like breath, casting shadows that dance along the walls. Inside Roman homes, families gather near these small flames, their faces warmed by the glow. A father might tell stories of old heroes, of Aeneas or Romulus, as his children fight, sleep beside him. Outside, the streets darken quickly. Torches burn low, and the air grows colder. The moon hangs high above the rooftops, reflected faintly in the sluggish river below. It is in this dimness that the empire reveals another side of itself, quieter, more human. The marble temples lose their grandeur, and the city becomes a place of silhouettes and echoes. You can almost hear the faint creak of a door, the whisper of sandals on stone. Rome, at night, is both vast and intimate, a place where shadows hold stories. Contrary to what one might imagine, ancient Rome never truly slept. Even after the markets closed and the Senate emptied, life continued to pulse through the labyrinth of streets and alleyways. The watchmen, vigiles, roamed with torches in hand, their sandals slapping softly against the cobblestones. They were the guardians of the night, keeping fires at bay and maintaining a fragile order. Yet, in the corners of the Subura district, laughter and music still echoed. The taverns, known as Popini, were crowded with sailors, soldiers, and slaves. They drank watered wine, ate bowls of lentils or salted fish, and gambled beneath the smoke-stained ceilings. Not far away, in elegant villas, the wealthy reclined on couches, feasting late into the hours. They discussed philosophy, poetry, and politics while servants poured wine and cleared platters of roasted meats. From luxury to poverty, from marble halls to wooden shacks, the Roman night belonged to everyone, a shared silence threaded with 1,000 lives. The hum of voices, the faint clink of cups, and the occasional bark of a stray dog filled the air. Rome's heartbeat slowed, but it never ceased. Yet for all its beauty, the Roman night carried a quiet unease. The darkness was thick, and for many, it felt alive. Without streetlights, the roads between neighborhoods became perilous, haunted by thieves, drunks, and spirits from old tales. Romans were deeply superstitious, and when the lamps went out, imaginations came alive. They believed in restless ghosts, in curses whispered through the night wind, in the evil eye cast by those envious of fortune. Many refused to step outside after midnight without an amulet or charm. The same city that celebrated gods and heroes by day trembled before unseen powers by night. Still, life went on. People whispered prayers before sleep, hoping their homes would remain untouched by fire or fate. Lovers met in secret gardens, while beggars sought shelter beneath temple steps. It was a world of contradictions, a civilization that built wonders, yet feared shadows. And as the hours deepened, the line between dream and reality seemed to blur. Rome at night was both feast and fear, laughter and silence, glory and fragility. In the quiet hours before dawn, Rome takes on a dreamlike stillness. The torches have burned low, the taverns have emptied, and even the Tiber seems to flow more slowly. The city breathes, suspended between sleep and awakening. Somewhere, a rooster crows, echoing faintly across the hills. The baker's oven glows once more. A mother adjusts her child's blanket, whispering a soft prayer to the household gods. It is in these moments that one feels closest to the heartbeat of the empire, not in its triumphs or monuments, but in its quiet humanity. The same stars that shone on emperors also watched over slaves. The same night that cloaked marble palaces also covered straw beds. The Roman night was vast, but intimate, a shared dream across classes and centuries. As we journey deeper into this ancient darkness, we'll uncover what the Romans truly ate, drank, and feared, and how their world, though long gone, still stirs quietly within the rhythm of our own nights. As the lamps flickered to life across Rome, the act of eating became something far greater than a simple need. It was ritual, performance, and pleasure intertwined. To dine in ancient Rome was to participate in the rhythm of empire itself. Meals began slowly, with the washing of hands in perfumed water and the soft murmur of conversation. Reclining on couches arranged around a low table, guests leaned on their left arms, leaving their right hands free to eat. Silver plates gleamed, and slaves moved quietly between them, bearing trays of steaming dishes. Even the humblest homes followed a form of this tradition. Though their meals were simpler, their oil lamps smaller, their bread coarser. Food was a social mirror. It revealed who you were, how much you possessed, and what you valued. The Romans did not just eat to survive. They ate to display power, to honor the gods, and to savor beauty in its most tangible form. As the evening deepened, the first scents of the feast, herbs, roasted meats, and spiced wine, filled the air, carrying with them the whispers of centuries. For most Romans, life was sustained by simplicity. Bread was the cornerstone of every meal, coarse and dark for the poor, white and soft for the privileged. The scent of freshly baked loaves was as familiar to Rome as the sound of footsteps on stone. Bakers worked before dawn, their ovens glowing against the night, shaping the substance that would feed a city of millions. Olive oil, the golden essence of the Mediterranean, was poured over everything: bread, vegetables, even desserts. It was nourishment, light, and medicine all at once. Alongside it came olives, cheese, and pulses, lentils, chickpeas, and beans stewed with garlic or herbs. These were the foods that kept the empire alive, humble, filling, eternal. And yet, even in their simplicity, there was reverence. A farmer's meal beneath the open sky might have lacked luxury, but not meaning. Each bite was a quiet prayer to the earth that fed them. The same sun that ripened the grain also gilded the marble of the emperor's palace, and both, in their own way, were part of the same feast. But for the wealthy, food became a spectacle. To dine at a senator's banquet was to witness decadence elevated to art. Tables groaned under dishes that seemed to mock the very idea of moderation. Roasted peacocks with feathers reattached, flamingo tongues glazed in honey, dormice stuffed with nuts and herbs. These were not meals meant to satisfy hunger, but to display dominion over nature, over wealth, over the boundaries of taste itself. The ingredients came from the farthest reaches of the empire. Dates from Egypt, oysters from Britain, pepper from India, and garum, the beloved fermented fish sauce, from Spain and North Africa. Its pungent aroma filled kitchens and courtyards alike, poured over nearly every dish, rich or poor. The Romans adored flavor that shocked the senses, sweet with salty, sour with spice, hot with cold. It was as though each bite reminded them of conquest, that their empire stretched as far as the tongue could taste. And yet, in candlelight, amid laughter and music, one might forget the cruelty behind such luxury. The slaves who cooked, the farmers who starved, the lands stripped bare to feed this endless appetite. Beyond the villas and marble halls, the common people of Rome gathered around smaller, humbler tables. Their meals were simple, but no less alive with flavor. A bowl of pulse, a thick porridge made from barley or spelt, might serve as breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Into it, they mixed whatever they could afford: bits of onion, leeks, cheese, or fish. Meat was rare, a luxury reserved for festivals or stolen moments of fortune. Many found their food in the thermopolia, ancient street-side eateries that served hot meals for a few coins. There, in the open air, one could buy bread dipped in wine, lentil stew, or even fried sausages sizzling in clay pots. The scent of these modest feasts drifted through narrow alleys, mingling with the smoke of lamps and the laughter of those who could afford, for one night, to feel full. For them, food was not abundance, it was endurance. Yet, even in scarcity, there was a certain beauty. Families ate together, shared together, and in those quiet moments, Rome's greatness was not in its emperors or monuments, but in its survival, the unbroken rhythm of life beneath the vast, indifferent sky. No Roman feast was complete without wine, but to the Romans, wine was never just wine. It was the heartbeat of conversation, the mark of civilization itself. They never drank it pure. To do so was considered barbaric. Instead, they mixed it with water, honey, and herbs, sometimes warming it with spices, sometimes cooling it with snow carried from distant mountains. For the wealthy, the cups were silver, the wine aged and perfumed. For the poor, it was sour and cheap, but still sacred in its own way. Toasts were made to the gods, to friendship, to love. Yet with every sip came the risk of excess. Drunkenness was both condemned and celebrated, mocked in satire, yet embraced in secret. Beneath the glittering chandeliers of patrician halls, laughter often turned to slurred whispers, and the night grew heavy with the scent of wine and weariness. In these moments, the Roman feast became something dreamlike, a blur of warmth, music, and desire. The empire seemed eternal then, shining in the glow of 100 lamps, even as its heart, quietly, began to decay beneath the weight of its pleasures. When the last cups were drained and the lamps burned low, the Roman feast came to its gentle close. Slaves cleared the tables, musicians fell silent, and the guests reclined in the fading warmth of conversation. The feast, whether in a palace or a crowded tenement, had served its purpose, to remind each Roman of their place in the grand design. Food in Rome was more than sustenance. It was language. It spoke of wealth, of faith, of fear. A simple loaf of bread could symbolize the favor of the gods, while a lavish dish could whisper of pride and vanity. Across the centuries, that table still lingers, in memory, in ruins, in the faint aroma of olive oil and smoke that seems to cling to time itself. The Romans lived to eat, and through eating, they revealed who they were: conquerors, dreamers, survivors. As the last embers of the hearth glow softly against the stone, the empire seems to rest, content, full and fragile. Beyond the walls, the city sleeps under the watchful stars, and the story of what they ate becomes, in truth, the story of who they were. In ancient Rome, drink was more than a comfort. It was civilization distilled into a cup. To drink was to be Roman, to partake in the rhythm of the empire that stretched from the misty shores of Britain to the golden deserts of Egypt. As the day faded and the torches were lit, the people of Rome reached for their pitchers, their clay cups, and their amphorae sealed with wax. Every drop carried a story, from the crisp water drawn from aqueducts that spanned mountains, to the heavy, spiced wine served at banquets. Romans drank not merely to quench thirst, but to connect to each other, to their gods, to their fleeting pleasures. In the cool courtyards of villas, slaves poured wine that smelled faintly of honey and sun-warmed grapes. In the bustling taverns, the poor sipped rougher vintages, sharp and bitter, but still precious. The act of drinking, whether in silk or rags, carried the same quiet ritual, a pause between labor and rest, between the weight of life and the promise of night. Water was life, But in Rome, it was also an engineering miracle. The aqueducts, those graceful arches marching across the hills, brought pure spring water into the heart of the empire. Flowing day and night, it filled public baths, fountains, and cisterns with a ceaseless, whispering sound. To a Roman, the murmur of running water was a symbol of divine favor, a reminder that the gods smiled upon their city. Yet, drinking water directly was sometimes viewed with suspicion. In a time before filters or boiling, clean water was precious, and even the purest streams could harbor illness. The wealthy often mixed water with wine, herbs, or vinegar to purify it. Others flavored it with honey and fruit, creating soft drinks that refreshed the body and pleased the tongue. The poorest citizens, who lived far from the main fountains, drank from wells or the Tiber itself, a gamble that often brought sickness. Still, when one lifted a cup of water to their lips, they felt the weight of empire behind it. The stones, the sweat, the ambition that made the impossible flow through marble pipes and into their homes. If water was the gift of the gods, wine was their language. The Romans loved wine with a passion that bordered on devotion. It was poured in temples as offerings to Bacchus, the god of revelry, and shared in homes as a symbol of joy and peace. Yet Roman wine was unlike the clear, delicate drink we know today. It was thick, often sweet, and rarely drunk alone. They mixed it with water, always, sometimes as much as 3 parts to 1. Drinking undiluted wine was a barbaric act, a loss of control unworthy of a Roman. Into their wine, they added everything from herbs and salt to pepper, resin, or ashes, chasing strange combinations of flavor. Honeyed wine, known as mulsum, was served at the beginning of feasts, golden and fragrant. Spiced wine, condidum paradoxum, was drunk warm, laced with saffron, bay leaves, and peppercorns. And always, there was the ritual, the raising of the cup, the clinking of clay, the murmured bene bibera, drink well. Whether poured for emperors or slaves, wine carried the same whisper of humanity, a longing for warmth, connection, and escape. Not all Romans could afford fine wine or fresh water. In the poorer quarters, people made do with what they had, and their ingenuity gave rise to curious concoctions. One of the most common was pasca, a humble mixture of vinegar and water, sometimes sweetened with herbs or honey. Soldiers drank it on campaign, laborers carried it to the fields, and slaves sipped it during long hours of toil. It was sour, sharp, and strangely refreshing, keeping thirst at bay and preventing illness. Others brewed drinks from barley, fermented fruits, or even spoiled wine reboiled to make it drinkable again. In taverns, such mixtures were sold cheaply, ladled into clay cups that bore the fingerprints of countless hands. The taste may not have been pleasant, but for many, it was survival in liquid form. The rich might sneer, but the poor knew a secret. In those rough brews lay resilience, a reminder that even without gold, they could still share warmth, laughter, and life. As the night deepened, you could hear them outside the taverns, cups raised, voices mingling with the hum of the city, a toast to endurance in the heart of empire. But with abundance came danger. The Romans' love for wine bordered on obsession, and their pursuit of pleasure often blurred into excess. Poets wrote of banquets where guests drank until they collapsed, and where laughter gave way to sickness and shame. Some wines were adulterated with lead, added to sweeten the flavor, slowly poisoning those who drank them. Others were stretched with seawater or mixed with herbs meant to enhance desire, clouding the mind in strange dreams. Even emperors were not immune to indulgence. Nero was said to drink until dawn, his table glittering with goblets of gold. Yet beneath the decadence lay fragility, an empire drinking to forget its mortality. Philosophers like Seneca warned that moderation was the mark of wisdom, that to drown in pleasure was to lose one's soul. But such words were easily lost in the glow of candlelight and the taste of honeyed wine. The Romans celebrated life in the only way they knew how, by drinking deeply, even when the cup was cracked. As the night waned and the city began to quiet, the final cup was poured, a simple one, perhaps, or the dregs of a grand amphora. The air was heavy with the scent of grapes, smoke, and sleep. A slave might sip what was left before extinguishing the lamps. A poet might linger over his cup, watching the moon through the window, composing lines that would outlive him. Across Rome, from palaces to taverns, the same ritual unfolded, the closing of the day with a drink in hand. It was more than thirst that drew them to it. The Romans drank to remember and to forget. They drank to honor the gods and to silence their fears. Each sip, each swallow, carried both celebration and surrender. And as the city finally drifted into uneasy sleep, the cups lay empty beside the embers, silent witnesses to an empire that lived passionately, drank deeply, and dreamed restlessly beneath the endless Roman night. As the last streaks of sunset faded behind the hills, the Roman world slipped into a different kind of life. The hum of the day gave way to softer sounds, the rustle of linen curtains, the clinking of oil lamps being filled, the distant barking of dogs. Nightfall in Rome was not merely the absence of light, but the awakening of another realm, quieter, darker, and filled with unseen motion. Oil lamps flickered to life, their flames trembling like living hearts. They cast long shadows against walls of marble and plaster, turning ordinary rooms into dreamlike spaces. Outside, the streets began to empty. The day's heat lingered in the stones, and the air smelled faintly of smoke, dust, and river water. In that dim half-light, time seemed to slow. The empire that had shouted all day now murmured, its pulse hidden beneath layers of silence. For the people of Rome, night was both a comfort and a warning, a time to rest and to remember that not everything in the city was under human control. To walk through Rome after dark was to step into uncertainty. There were no streetlights, no guards on every corner. Only the glow of scattered torches and the occasional lantern swaying in a doorway. The stone-paved roads, alive with crowds by day, turned shadowed and silent by night. The vigiles, the night watchmen, patrolled with torches, listening for the telltale crackle of fire or the cry of distress. But even they were few, and danger often traveled faster than light. Thieves prowled the alleys, their sandals wrapped in cloth to silence their steps. Drunks stumbled from taverns, singing half-forgotten songs. Lovers met in secret corners, cloaked by darkness. The rich rarely walked at night. They sent slaves ahead with lamps or avoided the streets altogether. But for the poor, the city's darkness was inescapable. They moved cautiously, whispering brief prayers to Mercury, protector of travelers, or to their Laras. The household spirits they hoped still watched over them from afar. Each footstep echoed like a secret, and even the bravest souls knew that Rome's beauty, once swallowed by night, could turn swiftly into menace. If one stood upon a rooftop as the city slept, Rome would seem alive in a gentler way. The great monuments glowed faintly in the moonlight, the Colosseum's arches like the ribs of a sleeping beast, the Forum resting in quiet dignity. Far below, the city whispered. You could hear the soft cries of merchants closing their stalls, the flap of a cloth curtain in the wind, the creak of a wagon wheel on stone. Somewhere, a dog barked, answered by another from a distant street. The Tiber murmured endlessly, its dark waters reflecting the silver of the moon. And above it all, faintly, drifted the scent of burning oil and sweet myrrh. To the Romans, these sounds and smells were more than background. They were omens. A sudden gust of wind or a creaking shutter might be taken as a sign from the gods, a reminder that unseen forces moved beside them. Even sleep itself was considered sacred, a state in which the soul wandered, touched by dreams that could carry divine messages or hidden warnings. Romans feared the night not only for its dangers, but for its mysteries. They believed that darkness was home to spirits, some benign, others vengeful. The Laras and Penates, guardians of the household, were thought to protect the home after sunset, their presence flickering in the glow of the hearth. But there were darker entities too, the lemurs and larvae, restless ghosts of the unburied or forgotten dead. During the festival of Lemuria, families would rise at midnight, walking barefoot through their homes while tossing black beans behind them, whispering ancient charms to drive the spirits away. With these beans, I redeem me and mine, they would say 9 times over, before clanging bronze to chase the ghosts into silence. Outside, crossroads were considered dangerous, places where the boundaries between the living and the dead thinned. Offerings of bread, salt, or wine were left there for wandering souls. And though few admitted it, many Romans swore they had felt the presence of something unseen watching from the shadows, following them home on moonless nights. Yet amid the fear, there was comfort too. Families gathered close when darkness came, their small rooms glowing with the warmth of shared breath and flame. Children listened wide-eyed as elders whispered stories of gods and monsters, of heroes who outwitted the spirits of the night. Lovers spoke softly in the safety of candlelight, while mothers hung charms over sleeping infants. Small figures of silver, bone, or clay shaped like hands or eyes to ward off evil. Many Romans placed offerings near their beds, a cup of wine, a sprig of laurel, or a pinch of salt, hoping to invite peace into their dreams. In the stillness, the creak of a door or a shifting shadow might stir a flicker of fear, but the ritual of the night, the lighting of the lamp, the final prayer, the gentle closing of eyes, brought reassurance. Beyond the reach of the city's noise, there was serenity in the darkness. For all its dangers, Rome's night also wrapped its people in something sacred, a kind of ancient quiet, deep and unbroken, that belonged to no emperor or god, but to the heartbeat of the city itself. By the time the moon reached its highest point, Rome lay beneath a shimmering veil of stillness. Fires burned low, and even the vigilas moved more slowly, their torches now dim embers against the vast black sky. On distant hills, temples stood like pale ghosts, their columns etched in silver light. Within the city, countless lives drifted in dreams. The poor curled on straw beds, the wealthy reclined beneath fine linen, all equal beneath the night's silence. Yet somewhere, the night never ended. Bakers worked in the glow of their ovens, soldiers kept watch on the walls, and priests tended sacred fires that could never be allowed to die. The empire's breath continued, quiet but eternal. Above it all, the stars watched, as they always had, ancient witnesses to a people who both feared and worshipped the dark. And as dawn began to stir beyond the hills, Rome seemed to exhale again, as though the night's spell had finally broken. The lamps would soon go out, the voices would rise, and the city would awaken. But for a few lingering moments, in the hush before morning, one could still feel the mystery of Rome after dark, vast, ancient, and alive with the gentle hum of its sleeping soul. When darkness settled over ancient Rome, another world stirred beneath the calm. The bustling empire that glittered in daylight became a place of mystery, where every whisper carried meaning and every shadow might hide a presence unseen. Romans were proud of their rational minds, their philosophers and laws. Yet when the lamps went out, reason often gave way to something older, deeper, and far more primal. The unseen world was close at hand. They believed the dark was alive, filled with spirits of the restless dead, strange omens, and divine forces that slipped quietly through the cracks of night. To live in Rome was to live with that tension, the glory of civilization above, and the echo of the unknown below. Foremost among the terrors of night were the lemurs, the wandering spirits of the unburied or forgotten dead. Romans believed that if proper funeral rites were neglected, the soul could not find peace. These ghosts were thought to drift through the city's narrow lanes, drawn to the warmth of the living. They could appear as faint lights, strange cold breezes, or even whispers calling one's name. Families feared them enough to dedicate entire festivals, like the Lemuria, to appease their anger. During those nights, fathers would rise from bed, walk barefoot through the house, and toss black beans behind them while chanting words of banishment. With these beans, I redeem me and mine, they murmured, hoping the spirits would gather their offering and depart into the dark. Beyond the lemurs were the larvae, darker, more dangerous entities. Unlike the gentle shades of ancestors or the neutral ghosts of the forgotten, these were malevolent forces, feeding on fear and illness. Some believe they haunted crossroads, where the worlds of the living and the dead overlapped. Others claimed they lingered near tombs or in abandoned homes, their whispers enough to drive a man mad. Priests of certain cults were said to know rituals to bind or banish them, though few dared to attempt it. For the ordinary Roman, protection lay in simple charms, iron nails hammered into door frames, or amulets shaped like eyes or hands, meant to ward off evil. The people of Rome understood something essential. The line between the natural and the supernatural was as thin as a candle flame and easily snuffed out. But not all fears were of the dead. The living could be just as terrifying. Among the most dreaded figures of Roman imagination were the strigi, witches who were said to fly at night, feeding on the life of infants or draining the strength of the unwary. They were described as part woman, part bird, with claws and wings that rustled softly in the dark. Pliny the Elder wrote of such creatures with uneasy fascination, describing how they could transform their shape or send curses through mere words. Families hung garlands of garlic or wore amulets of wolf teeth to keep them away. And when a child fell mysteriously ill, mothers sometimes whispered that a striga had passed nearby, unseen but not unfelt. In the countryside beyond the city walls, other fears roamed. Travelers spoke of the Versipels, men who could shed their skin and become wolves under the moonlight. Some said they were cursed soldiers. Others claimed they had made dark pacts with forest spirits. The legend of the lycanthrope, the Roman werewolf, carried both horror and wonder. To become one was a punishment, a loss of self, but also a brush with ancient power. Shepherds told tales of hearing strange howls at night, not of animals, but of men trapped between worlds. The Romans, pragmatic yet poetic, never entirely dismissed these stories. The wild still held sway over their imaginations, a reminder that even Rome's might could not tame the mysteries of nature. Where the Greeks spoke of daimons, the Romans feared noumena, divine forces that could bless or destroy without warning. Some were household guardians, others were far less kind. The incubus and succubus, spirits said to visit sleepers and steal their breath, were whispered about in the dark corners of the city. Nightmares, they believed, were not merely dreams but visitations, moments when a spirit pressed down upon the chest, draining life or desire. To ward them off, Romans invoked the protection of Mercury or placed protective symbols at the head of the bed. Even emperors were not immune. Augustus himself was said to have carried a piece of seal skin to repel bad dreams. For in Rome, even the most powerful feared what might come when their eyes closed. The Romans lived in a world saturated with signs. A sudden chill breeze, an owl's cry at midnight, or a shadow crossing the moon could all foretell doom. Augurs, priests trained in the reading of omens, held great influence, interpreting these nightly messages from the gods. A flicker of a torch might signal divine displeasure, while a meteor streaking across the sky was a warning of war or death. Even the movement of animals carried meaning. A dog howling in the dark was never just a sound. Superstition and religion were threads of the same tapestry, weaving fear and faith into one. For to understand the night was, perhaps, to glimpse the will of the gods themselves. And yet, amidst all these fears, the Romans sought comfort in ritual. Every household had its patterns. Lamps lit in certain corners, charms placed by doors, prayers whispered before bed. The repetition of these acts brought a fragile peace, a sense that the chaos outside could be held at bay. Mothers told their children that the Laras would guard them, that the ancestors watched kindly from beyond the veil. Before sleep, some burned incense. Others washed their hands and faces, purifying the day's worries. In that soft routine, fear became manageable, folded into faith. The darkness might still whisper, but Rome's people met it not with defiance, but with quiet endurance. In the end, what Romans feared most was not the dark itself, but the mystery within it, the feeling that the world was larger, older, and more alive than they could ever understand. And perhaps, deep down, that fear carried a strange kind of comfort. It reminded them that even amid empire and order, they were still part of something untamed. The night was their mirror, beautiful, unpredictable, and full of ancient power. So, when the lamps dimmed and sleep crept in, Rome became quiet again, a city resting beneath its veil of superstition and dreams, where gods and ghosts alike lingered just beyond the reach of dawn. When the city of Rome finally began to hush, when the cries from the taverns softened and the clatter of carts faded into memory, the people turned inward, into the uneasy stillness of night. Sleep, for the Romans, was never simple. It came as both necessity and mystery, a daily surrender to something unseen. In the dim light of oil lamps, families settled onto their straw-stuffed mattresses or shared wooden beds, the air heavy with the warmth of the day. Even the wealthiest, reclining upon soft couches draped in linen, approached sleep with reverence and caution. They knew that rest was not merely the closing of eyes, but a crossing, a journey into the realm of dreams, omens, and wandering spirits. The night might offer peace, or it might open doors better left shut. The Roman cubiculum, or bedroom, was often small and windowless, more a chamber for retreat than luxury. Its walls were painted with simple frescoes, sometimes pastoral scenes, sometimes gods of sleep and protection. The bed was low, supported by ropes and wooden frames, covered with woolen blankets or animal hides in the colder months. Near the head of the bed, a small shrine might flicker with the light of a clay lamp, its flame casting trembling shadows. To extinguish that lamp before rest was to invite the unknown. Many Romans preferred to let it burn through the night, believing its glow would ward off spirits and keep nightmares at bay. In such rooms, enclosed by silence and shadow, the Romans drifted into a sleep that was never entirely their own. The ancients understood how fragile sleep could be. Physicians like Galen and Pliny the Elder wrote of its mysteries, calling it the body's healer and the soul's escape. They advised light meals before bed, a brief walk to clear the mind, and a prayer to Somnus, the god of sleep, whose gentle wings carried mortals into dreams. Yet sleep was not guaranteed. The city's sounds, dogs barking, drunkards singing, carts rumbling across the stones, could keep even the weary awake. Some Romans drank herbal infusions made from poppy or chamomile. Others sought talismans or invoked charms against insomnia. May Somnus close my eyes. A simple line carved into an old tablet reads, the plea of a restless soul seeking the same peace we all still chase centuries later. To the Romans, sleep was not merely rest, it was divine. Somnus, god of sleep, ruled over a shadowed realm beneath the earth, near the river Lethe. There, it was said, he dwelt in a cavern where no rooster crowed, no light dared enter, and poppies bloomed in eternal twilight. From this quiet kingdom, his sons, the Oneiroi, carried dreams to mortals. Each had a purpose. Morpheus shaped dreams of human form. Phopter sent visions of beasts, and Phantasos conjured the impossible. To dream was to receive a message from this silent world, a whisper from the divine. Sleep, then, was not passive, it was a sacred visitation. And when Romans lay upon their beds, they believed that the boundary between life and the underworld grew thin. Romans viewed dreams with reverence and suspicion alike. To them, the night was a messenger. A dream could warn of danger, foretell a triumph, or deliver wisdom from the gods. Even emperors sought to interpret their night visions. Augustus once claimed a dream had guided him to his destiny, while Caesar ignored a prophetic nightmare on the eve of his death. Dream interpreters, coniectors somnorum, held positions of quiet influence, decoding the language of sleep for the anxious and the powerful. They studied symbols. To dream of fire meant passion or destruction, of birds, divine favor, of water, renewal or loss. No vision was meaningless. The Romans believed that the gods spoke most clearly when the world was silent. Yet not all dreams were gentle. The Romans feared the incubus, a suffocating spirit said to sit upon a sleeper's chest, pressing the breath from their lungs. They called it Epials, the night leaper, and believed it fed on fear itself. Those who awoke from such nightmares would often find their limbs frozen, their hearts racing, their throats dry, and whisper prayers to drive the spirit away. Women, too, were said to be visited by nocturnal beings, the succubi, who sought warmth and life from the sleeping. Whether these tales were superstition or an ancient attempt to describe sleep paralysis, they reveal how deeply Romans respected the mystery of the night. Dreams were not just figments. They were encounters with forces unseen, as real as any waking fear. Dream interpretation became a quiet art, woven into daily life. Books like Artemidorus's Onira Critica guided readers through the symbols of sleep. A dream of being crowned could foretell success, of losing teeth, betrayal. Soldiers dreamt of eagles and took it as a sign of Mars's favor. Lovers dreamt of honey, believing it meant devotion and sweetness. Even physicians recorded their patients' dreams, seeing them as clues to the balance of the body's humors. The mind, they thought, revealed its health through its nightly visions. And so, sleep became both mirror and oracle, a space where the boundaries of self blurred, and the unconscious spoke in riddles older than Rome itself. Beneath their fascination with dreams lay a deeper fear, the fear that one might never awaken. To the Romans, sleep and death were twin brothers, somnus and mors, separated only by a fragile breath. A still sleeper might be gently checked by a loved one, just to be sure their chest still rose. Funerary art often depicted the dead as peacefully sleeping, their eyes closed, faces serene, as though merely resting until the next dawn. But behind that image was unease, a sense that every night, as they drifted into darkness, they flirted with eternity. For some, that idea brought comfort. For others, a silent dread that the gods might not return their souls come morning. And yet, amid all these beliefs and fears, there was beauty in the Roman night. The city that never truly slept would finally fall still. Lamps flickered low, the stars shimmered faintly above the rooftops, and somewhere, a poet might murmur lines to the moon. Sleep, however restless, came to most. In those hours, all were equal: the emperor and the slave, the merchant and the child. Dreams mingled, the real and the unreal blurred, and the heart of the empire pulsed softly beneath a blanket of dark. When dawn's first light touched the stones of the Forum once more, Rome stirred, reborn from its nightly death. For every morning in Rome was a small resurrection. The gods had granted the world another day. As the sun sank below the 7 hills, not every Roman sought silence or sleep. For some, the night was not a time of rest. It was a realm of escape. In the dim courtyards of taverns, along the winding streets of Trastevere, laughter began to rise with the scent of sweetened wine. Oil lamps flickered against the walls, casting a honey-colored glow on the faces of those gathered to drink away the weight of the day. The Romans feared the dark, yes, but they also found ways to outdrink their fears. They poured wine into silver cups, mixed with honey or herbs, and toasted the gods of pleasure and forgetfulness. For in a city that never fully slept, intoxication became a form of prayer, a small rebellion against the silence of the night. Wine was not simply a drink in Rome. It was a symbol of civilization itself. To drink was to commune with culture, poetry, and divinity. Yet Romans never drank wine plain. It was always diluted with water, sometimes flavored with myrrh, pepper, or rose petals. The poor drank sour pasca, a vinegar-like mix that quenched thirst and kept disease away, while the rich sipped Falernian, the golden wine prized by emperors. Cups clinked, laughter echoed, and the lines between respectability and excess blurred easily. At banquets, hosts urged guests to drink to health, to drink to memory, and often to drink until dawn. Wine freed tongues and loosened truth. It revealed what the day's masks concealed. In that gentle blur between pleasure and surrender, the Romans found temporary peace, an escape not from the dark outside, but from the one within. The Popini, Rome's taverns, were the beating heart of its nocturnal life. Their air was thick with smoke, sweat, and the murmur of deals whispered over earthen cups. Some were simple counters carved into walls, serving warm stew and cheap wine to laborers. Others were places of hidden luxury, with back rooms, musicians, and dim corners for lovers or conspirators. The poor came to forget their hunger, the soldiers their loneliness, the poets their disappointments. The tavern was democracy in its truest form, where senators might drink beside sailors, and laughter drowned out the divisions of class. To pass a night, there was to drift into a haze of warmth and noise, the candlelight trembling like memory itself. Music was the soul of the Roman night. Flutes, lyres, and tambourines filled the air with melodies that blurred the boundary between joy and melancholy. A lone musician might sit in a corner, plucking soft notes as wine flowed, the tune mingling with the hum of voices. Dancers swayed in the lamplight, their shadows stretching long across the walls. For the weary and the dreamers alike, this was a kind of medicine. In the rhythms of song and the sweetness of drink, the Romans sought to forget the world's hardness, its wars, debts, and unspoken fears. Some drank until laughter gave way to silence, until music became the soft bridge into sleep. And in that moment, between wakefulness and oblivion, even the poorest man could feel divine. Not all of Rome's nights were spent in taverns. Lovers found their refuge beneath the same moon, in gardens perfumed with laurel and myrtle, or in the quiet corners of domus courtyards. For them, night offered anonymity, a freedom denied by day. They spoke softly of passion, of fleeting moments stolen from duty and time. Roman poets wrote endlessly of these encounters. Ovid, Propertius, and Tibullus all painted the night as both sanctuary and snare. The moon was our witness, one line whispers, and the stars our only accomplices. In such moments, Rome felt small, tender, almost timeless, the vast empire reduced to the rhythm of breath, the touch of hands, the whisper of silk in the dark. For some, wine was more than pleasure, it was revelation. The cult of Bacchus, god of ecstasy and madness, promised freedom through ritual intoxication. In secret ceremonies, followers gathered with wreaths of ivy and serpentine dances, letting music and wine dissolve the boundaries between mortal and divine. To outsiders, these rites seemed scandalous, even dangerous. But to participants, they were communion, a shedding of fear, a return to primal joy. The Romans feared Bacchus's chaos, yet secretly envied it. In a world of order and empire, Bacchic revelry offered surrender, a way to feel, if only for a night, that the self could vanish into something infinite. Among the revelers were thinkers, too, those who saw in drunkenness a strange form of wisdom. Philosophers like Seneca and Cicero warned against excess, but admitted that wine, in moderation, revealed the truth of one's heart. In vino veritas, they said, in wine there is truth. A cup too many loosened speech, broke down pride, and sometimes birthed poetry. It was said that Horace composed some of his gentlest verses while half dreaming under the influence of Falernian wine. For the Romans, drunkenness was not always sin. It was a doorway. Through it, the weary mind slipped free from worry, and the soul, for a fleeting instant, could glimpse its own reflection in the glass. By midnight, the city pulsed with uneven life. Somewhere, a lute still played. Somewhere else, a merchant stumbled home, his laughter echoing through the stone alleys. Torches burned low in the Subura, and at the Forum, stray dogs prowled among the pillars. Rome was at once asleep and awake, divided between dream and indulgence. Even the stars seemed to shimmer differently above its rooftops, as though watching the eternal play of pleasure and peril below. The empire's strength, its wealth, its cruelty, all were forgotten for a few fragile hours. In their place remained only humanness, tired, yearning, fragile, and alive beneath the whispering dark. When dawn finally came, it rose upon a city heavy with the scent of spilled wine and cooling ash. Streets once alive with song now lay quiet, the only sound the cooing of doves on temple roofs. Those who had feasted drifted in uneasy sleep. Those who had prayed for rest blinked awake to another day. Rome renewed itself in the pale gold of morning, as it always did. But the memory of the night lingered. The laughter, the music, the confessions made in candlelight. For all their fears and gods, the Romans were bound by the same truth we are. That night is not only a time of dread, but of release. In every shadow there was beauty, in every dream, a mirror of the soul. And when the first rays touched the Tiber once more, the city breathed, weary, human, and timeless. When the lamps dimmed and the last laughter from the taverns faded, Rome did not sleep completely. Beneath the quiet, there remained a pulse, the steady rhythm of footsteps on cobblestone, the distant echo of armor shifting in the night. Somewhere in the maze of alleys, a watchman leaned against a cold wall, peering into the darkness. Another stirred the embers of a small fire, warming hands roughened by duty. The eternal city required its guardians, for even in its grandeur, Rome was a place of danger and shadow. Fires, thieves, and spirits were said to wander freely once the sun had gone. The guards of the night, the vigiles, as they were known, became the empire's eyes after dusk. They were both protectors and prisoners of the city's darkness, watching over the restless empire while the world around them dreamed. The vigiles were not heroes in marble armor or noblemen of legend. They were ordinary men, often freed slaves or the poor, bound by duty to patrol the sleeping capital. Armed with staffs, buckets, and lanterns, they walked through the labyrinthine streets, calling out softly to one another as they passed. Their chief task was to prevent fires, a constant and deadly threat in a city built of wood and crowded tenements. When flames erupted, they raced through the night with water pumps and axes, battling chaos as the citizens screamed from their windows. Yet their watch was not only against fire. They guarded Rome from thieves, prowlers, and drunkards, from all the small hungers and fears that came alive under the moon. In many ways, the vigiles were Rome's heartbeat in the hours when others slept, their weary steps echoing through the centuries. Imagine, if you will, the Roman night, a world of shifting torchlight and deep silence. Somewhere, a stray dog whines. A cart creaks down a forgotten road, and above it all, the faint glow of a distant flame flickers against the rooftops. For the vigiles, each small sound carried weight. The city's silence was never trustful. It was alive, breathing, waiting. Sometimes a shout would break through the stillness, and the guards would run through twisting alleys, sandals slapping stone, lanterns swinging wildly until they reached the source. A quarrel, a fire, a thief cornered in the dark. They were not soldiers of glory, but of necessity, fighting battles that would never be written in history's grand tales. And when the danger passed, they returned to their lonely patrol, to the whispering wind and the haunting rhythm of the Roman night. The vigilas were not alone in their vigil. The Romans believed that unseen guardians also watched over the city after sunset, divine beings who patrolled the skies and the spirit world. The goddess Vesta, keeper of the sacred flame, was honored with offerings of oil and incense, so that her eternal fire would protect the heart of Rome. Mercury was invoked by merchants traveling late, and Janus, the god of thresholds and transitions, was prayed to by those crossing from day into night. Even humble doorways were guarded by tiny household spirits, the Laras and Penates, protectors of home and hearth. Before going to bed, many Romans murmured quiet prayers or left a small token of bread near the door, believing that the gods themselves passed by in the dark. It was said that as mortals slept, the divine kept watch, an eternal exchange between those who dreamed and those who guarded them. Yet for every god of protection, there was a shadow waiting beyond the lamplight. The Romans feared the restless dead, the lemurs, and believed these spirits wandered freely through the streets at night, seeking peace or vengeance. To appease them, families performed ancient rites, throwing black beans behind their shoulders while chanting prayers to drive the phantoms away. The vigilas themselves were said to avoid certain alleys after midnight, muttering charms under their breath as they passed crumbling tombs and abandoned shrines. For in Rome, the living and the dead shared the same space, divided only by the thin veil of night. Even the most hardened guard would sometimes pause, sensing a chill, wondering if unseen eyes followed his steps. It was this quiet tension between faith and fear that kept the empire awake long after the fires had gone out. Watching was more than labor, it was ritual. The night watch in Rome carried a sacred weight, an unspoken reverence for endurance and presence. Every flickering torch was a reminder that vigilance kept civilization alive. The vigilas guarded not only streets and markets, but the fragile illusion of peace that allowed the empire to dream. They knew that while emperors slept in marble chambers, their duty continued. Humble, unseen, but vital. To watch over Rome was to belong to something vast and eternal. Each night's end brought no applause, only the satisfaction of survival, of having kept the city breathing one more dawn. In their silence and constancy, they mirrored the gods they prayed to, patient, invisible, and ever watchful. As the horizon began to pale and the first birds stirred in the trees, the watchmen's lanterns dimmed. The cold dew settled on their cloaks, and their weary eyes lifted toward the faint blush of morning. Rome, still drowsy and soft in the half-light, seemed almost tender, stripped of its noise and ambition. The guards, exhausted but proud, would make their final rounds, nodding to one another as they returned to their posts. With sunrise, their work was done, and life resumed its familiar rhythm. The city they had guarded in silence would awaken in splendor, unaware of how much had been protected in the shadows. The vigilas disappeared into the crowd, anonymous once more, while the gods of night withdrew into the unseen, their task complete, until darkness came again. So now, as you drift into rest, imagine the gentle watch of ancient Rome continuing still, guards pacing softly through forgotten streets, the faint gleam of bronze catching moonlight, the invisible gaze of old gods lingering over sleeping rooftops. The city may have fallen to dust, its stones scattered and its temples silent, but its watchers remain. In every quiet hour of night, there is a whisper of their presence, a reminder that vigilance, even in stillness, has a kind of grace. Let that thought ease your mind, as though unseen protectors stand at the edge of your dreams, keeping the dark at bay. For just as they once guarded Rome, the spirit of the night's eternal vigil now guards you. Sleep softly, traveler, beneath the gaze of ancient eyes, in the calm and endless watch of history's night.